Hello everyone, welcome in to CMS Connected here on the Pulse Network. I am Tyler Pyburn. This is the content management industry's only news commentary show. Welcome in, thank you so much for joining us here towards the end of February, really. Year's already flying by, it's hard to believe. So glad you guys could join us as I mentioned. And really today, our discussion is all about intranets. Yes, I know you guys absolutely love that. So we're going to touch upon a plethora of different things throughout today's show. And it's not going to be me talking this entire time. Of course, joining me in studio, as always, is Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group. Scott, how you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you, man?
Very well. We got a pretty good show lined up today, huh?
Yeah, I'm interested in this show. I think, and even for folks who are not, focused on intranets, I think the idea that we've been talking about for the last 2 years since we've been doing this show is all about audience centricity. And in this case, the audience happens to be an audience of employees, and we're talking about collaborating with them. But I think a lot of the things that we'll talk about today with Dean really apply across the board.
So I got to ask kind of a more personal question. We had Kathy McKnight in just a little while. We've also had Tim Walters on the show. They had a webinar themselves just yesterday. Talk a little bit about that.
They did. Kathy and Tim talked on the webinar yesterday also about intranets. I think that's available on our website here pretty soon. But they talked about basically the notion of a social enterprise and that intranets are not just social for the sake of being social. It's not another water cooler. It really is all about collaboration. It's about getting work done. And that should be the principle behind any successful intranet.
Definitely. So like we said, today's topic is all about intranets, and here to talk a little bit more about intranets, we're going to have a little bit later on in the show, we're going to be welcoming in Dean Barker from Blend Interactive, as well as Seth Gottlieb is going to be doing the Spotlight segment on CoreMedia. So all that and more coming up in just a little bit. But before we get to the news and notes from around the entire industry, we have to, of course, as always, thank some of our sponsors that are out there. First off, Falcon Software. Falcon provides creative design, e-commerce, web content management, social and mobile solutions for organizations across the globe, as well as Digital Clarity Group. Now, DCG is a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. So I also would like to recommend one last thing to you guys. If you're watching this show right now live, what I would like you to do is take a look just below the actual player itself and go ahead and download that white paper. That's going to be giving you basically 9 best practices for measuring the performance of an intranet solution. So make sure to take a look at that. Don't do it until after the show, though, all right? We want you guys to tune in and have some fun and have a conversation, as always. So, with all that in mind, let's go ahead and let's get things started with some of the news and notes from throughout the entire CMS industry. And let's start with SharePoint. Is it going to be disappearing? Interesting conversation. Scott, I can already hear you smiling right now about this. So Chris Wright, the founder of Partner Pulse, he actually wrote an article on CMS Wire in which he actually predicts that SharePoint is going to be disappearing soon. Now, in the article, he actually states, in the not too distant future, I predict SharePoint will disappear altogether. It might take a year, maybe a little longer, but at some point soon, it will be gone. What actually is interesting about this is Chris does a lot of writing around SharePoint too.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this? I mean, that's a big statement out there. I mean, it'd be pretty cool for him if he's spot on and right about it. But what are your thoughts on it?
No, look, it's basically what it is excellent title writing, right? Because if you actually read below the title, he's basically talking about that SharePoint, the name goes away, not SharePoint, the concept, or SharePoint, the tool. So he's basically talking in there about, I think probably rightly so, is that as he looks forward into Office 365 and as that's rolling out, prior to the 2013 SharePoint release, that if you look at things like the navigation in Office 365 and some of the other capabilities there, that it really takes on a lot of the things that SharePoint exclusively does today as kind of a brand under the Microsoft umbrella. So it's really, he's not saying it goes away. He's basically just saying it's being rebranded and kind of, I don't know, maybe there's too much associated with that name. Maybe there's too much baggage with SharePoint.
I was going to say, what's the reasoning for that? Is that because of that, you think? Because, I mean, like you said, I mean, we've had this conversation on the show time and time again, just solely on SharePoint, what people think about SharePoint 2013 going forward, how it's going to actually grow. Do you think it's because it has that kind of connotation, that negative connotation that kind of comes with it in a sense?
Let's say for the first part that I don't know any inside information, so I have no idea if they're going to rebrand the name. But let's propose for the moment that they are. I think it actually could be a good idea to do. So maybe they're listening to this show and taking the advice. But no, I think SharePoint means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? So SharePoint is, as we've talked about, is a platform upon which to build a number of things. And so we've talked about their struggle to be a web CMS, right? So that's my kind of area of forte, and it doesn't really get a whole lot of play there. It's struggled to do basically any external application-facing stuff. It's not really. Rob Koplowitz from Forrester did a paper. He wrote, what was it called, about basically that SharePoint's entering its awkward teenage years. Basically saying that it's at that point where it's kind of getting big and getting used a lot, but it kind of is at its awkward moment. It can go in a number of different directions right now. So it can go and become, it's not doing any kind of business intelligence stuff, which a lot of its users would like. IT folks tend to love it. Its rankings are for their likeliness it is in the 70s, I think, in the high 70 percentiles. But then on the business side, they tend not to love it so much. And it's kind of the bane of their existence a little bit there. And it's getting kind of failing grades from the business side. So I think it's a lot of things, Tyler, to a lot of different people. And one of the things we talked about, again, its web capabilities, its social capabilities. Certainly, it's known well as as an intranet platform. Collaboration, it does so. File sharing, of course, a number of things like that. And so I think working it into an Office 365, as he's suggesting that it do, and if you look at the navigation, as he points out, not my original thoughts, the navigation Office 365 has Outlook, okay, so that'll be Outlook. Calendar, certainly something SharePoint provides. People, a people connector, that's what it's used for oftentimes. Newsfeed, of course, that's there. SkyDrive in terms of accessing files and things. And sites, of course, that's their site capability. So it makes sense what he's saying that could be.
Definitely does. Good stuff indeed. So let's move on to the very next topic, and let's talk about Adobe's VP of Enterprise Marketing actually making a new little shift here. We've actually had him on the show, Kevin Cochrane. He's been on the show. We've talked about it a handful of times now as well. And the number one question I think is, what would make the VP of Enterprise Marketing at Adobe, one of the biggest companies actually touting benefits of digital marketing customer experience, what would make him change his ways a little bit and switch over to the CMO of Enterprise Information Management Company like OpenText?
Right.
What would make him do that? What's your thoughts? I know you've actually spoke to Kevin, too, about this as well.
I have. I spoke to Kevin on the day that he made this shift, which was 2 or 3 Tuesdays ago. And I know, by the way, we asked him to join us over Skype, and he would much rather be here than where he is. He's got a dentist appointment at this very moment. So, Kevin, we're thinking of you right now. No, I actually think, counter to many of the folks in the industry who were all kind of going, wait, what? He moved? Why is he moving? Why would he go to OpenText? I think it's a really smart move on his part.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I really
what's
do.
the reason? Okay, smart move. You have to back that. You can't just say that.
I will. So number one, first of all, he has roots in enterprise information management, right? I mean, he was at Alfresco for a long time, very similar in terms of the capabilities, what they're providing to OpenText. It's on the open source side. He was at Interwoven, right? And then he went, and then of course his storied experience with Day and then moving over to Adobe. But he's been in this enterprise information management space, which is where OpenText plays, right? Primarily. But he also gets the benefit of his great capabilities in the customer experience management and the whole web side of things. But I think it's smart for him for a couple of reasons. One is, look, he was the hottest ticket on the market right now. I mean, he was a big
name. He was that free agent that people want.
He did a lot. He's done some pretty amazing things in the industry, and he's kind of the biggest name around to go and pull to lead a marketing team. That's number one. So he's able to basically write his ticket. Number two is, I think OpenText, they get a lot of brunt of people's dismay a little bit because they've done so many acquisitions. They have what seemingly appear to be competing products. I think it's valid that we've talked about them before, and people don't know exactly where they stand on a number of different things. They just have a lot of money to go and spend on a lot of different products, but they haven't really pulled it all together yet. Look, I think the expectations on Kevin are relatively low. You go into OpenText, it's like if in 2 years he doesn't move the needle very much, then it's like, well, you went to OpenText, what did you think? I mean, that's kind of their history. If he does move the needle, Kevin writes himself a ticket into the CEO position wherever the heck he wants to go in this industry. Absolutely.
Awesome. So what about from Adobe's side, though? What does Adobe do now?
Cry for a little while.
Yeah.
They lost a great guy who was a great leader, and Kevin is not just a marketing guy. He's very involved in the product product mapping and roadmap for that product. Worked with a great team, but he built a very good team around him. You know, Lonnie Stark was working directly for him. She's done some great things, and she manages a great team. We've worked with her a lot, and other folks that are in Kevin's organization. So he's put a really good organization together. They're pitted well to do great. I wouldn't want to try to step in after him.
Big shoes to fill for sure.
Yeah, I think they're huge shoes to fill. But they're in the leader spot, I think, by most accounts, and so they're going to do just fine.
Excellent. Next in line, basically, is what we'll say for that. And actually, next in line for the topics that we're going to cover. And let's actually talking about companies actually developing their own CMSs right now. Now, on February 11th, actually, Ron Miller from Fierce Content Management wrote a pretty interesting article based on the organization's decision to actually abandon Drupal for kind of a homegrown solution. Now, this actually kind of begs a pretty interesting question, Scott. You know, with so many quality WCM vendors that are out there, I mean, we see them, we talk about them on a monthly basis, really.
Yeah.
Why would you go to the custom route and keep it internally and say, well, we're going to build our own? Why would you do that? What's the reasoning behind that right now? And is that a smart one, honestly?
You would go the custom route to find out all the reasons why you shouldn't go the custom route and then write a great paper on it. No.
I'm sure you've written a few papers on that, haven't you?
No, actually, Tim Walters wrote a great paper, and while he was at Forrester, who's on my team, he wrote one of my first introductions to Tim, actually, before I knew him, was reading a paper of his that he wrote, basically all about why you shouldn't be building custom CMSs anymore. And we've worked with a number of organizations who are buying right now their first kind of marketplace CMS and coming off of a bespoke one that they've been built. And I think back in those days when they first started building them, they had pretty good reasons to do so. I mean, I think, you know, just 6 or 7 years ago, the landscape was not at all what it is today, and products were not nearly as mature. I think to start completely, and we were talking about this before the show, to start completely from the ground up, Tyler, would be not so smart a move. Like, you don't necessarily need, you can start from what they call a CMF, a content management framework, essentially, that has some of the capabilities of that kind of application level of the kind of versioning and the workflow and those sorts of things, and start from there. So you might need to be able to create, we've talked about that content management systems now are playing a much larger role in terms of presenting and interacting with the audience. We kind of call that experience layer. That might be something that you need to do on your own, because maybe you're a site that's, you know, really heavily on video or something, and so you need a different interface. Some things like that. Maybe a lot of logic. If you talk, you know, everyone likes to point to Amazons of the world who do some pretty innovative stuff. That's a tool that they built bespoke in themselves, right? It is their bread and butter of that organization, though. Everything goes through that. Is their, you know, they've got their
infrastructure.
That's right. So they're going to put a fleet, but you know, plan though to have a fleet of people behind it, be ready to be supporting it constantly, and it needs a lot of
it's someone's full-time job. It's a couple people's full-time job. It's not necessarily just okay, well, we've got it and it's good to go.
That's right.
You have to make sure you keep that in mind. Excellent. So we're going to go ahead and move on. We're going to be talking about CXM, because actually just a couple weeks ago, honestly, on February 8th, actually, Michael Assad, the co-founder and CEO of Agility, posted an interesting post on the CMS Report website, and based on another great article written by friend Robert Rose, BCG. Now, in Robert's article, he actually says, quote, right now, CXM is the sexiest thing that everyone is demoing and no one is actually doing. Now, that doesn't mean the technology doesn't work. No, in fact, many of the software companies have truly amazing capabilities to drive contextualized digital content experience across channels. It just means that marketers aren't ready for it.
Yeah.
What do you mean? What are your thoughts? Marketers aren't ready for it? They're not doing it right just yet?
I think this, shining a spotlight.
Of course, you're going to back up your boy, so I know that. But
Robert's one of the smartest guys out there, so yeah, I back up my boy. I'll follow him into
too.
a
I know
battle.
Robert. Yeah.
But I think it's right. Look, people are out there. Everybody wants to buy this. They want to ask us about customer experience. They want to talk about web engagement, all those sorts of things. And what it always ends up being is the phase 2 of any project, that kind of mythical phase 2 that you never really get to. It's like, we'll implement the baseline stuff now, and then we'll take advantage of that later. I think it's sad, but he brings up a number of good points. He talks about Bigfoot, unicorn, or aliens, and his question is, which of the 3 is it? Bigfoot he describes as being like really scary, that this is a scary phenomenon, too scary for marketers at this whole notion of engagement. And so you don't want it to be true because it's going to be too disruptive. The second one he talks about then is unicorns, which is that it's so wonderful and so fantastic, and it's a fantasy that it's also not going to happen because people just don't believe that it ever will happen. It's too good to be true, right? And then the third one is aliens, which he says, he describes aliens. I think it's great. Robert's a storyteller.
I know he is, and he depicts it perfectly. Which
and
is
the third one is aliens, and aliens are essentially that it's this foreign thing that you kind of like know that it's out there, but you're not really sure that you want to make contact with them yet, and you might also just be okay with, look, when they're ready to come to us, they'll come to us, so it'll fall in my lap, sort of a thing. And what he basically says is that's what he believes. It's the third one, that it's the aliens is kind of where most marketers are today. That they actually believe that it exists, they believe that you can achieve it, they're just not necessarily ready to achieve it yet. They've got a lot of the tools, they're using the tools only partially, frankly, very little, and they're not really achieving what they originally set out to go do with those tools. Awesome. That's his thing. Now, the point that you brought up was that Michael Assad's piece. So he wrote kind of a counterpiece.
Yep, exactly. He had a counterpiece to that, exactly. So I was going to say, touch upon what, I can read actually what Michael said. He said that, quote, marketers don't care because they don't need it. They've already figured out how to deliver experiences for their customers, or they're working on it and they don't need a CMS vendor technology to do that. So,
yeah.
I mean, that was kind of his counter to that. I mean,
right.
What are your thoughts to
so
what Michael
Robert
said
that, that basically they believe it, but it's just kind of too hard to go get right now. They'll park it off into the future at some point, and meanwhile they're kind of using tools minimally. Michael's saying
they don't need it.
That they don't need it at all.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, they're maximizing the use of their tools today. They have all these tools and they're making really good use of them. That's not our experience. I back Robert on this one. I think that might be Michael's experience. I think Michael is working with probably smaller organizations than the enterprises that we tend to be talking to. Mm-hmm. And so maybe they've got the marketing department of one or two who are having to, they don't have a huge budget. They have to make use of every advantage they can. And so they are using, whatever it is, WordPress to its fullest extent, and they've got Hootsuite in place. But our experience is that they're buying a lot of these tools. They're buying the Eloquas, barely using them. They're buying the Omnitures, barely using it for even what Google Analytics could do for them. They're not even using Google Analytics to its fullest extent. And so they're just leaving a lot of room for somebody to come in and be able to help them pull it all together, which is the kind of the point of the article that Robert ends up with, which is that there is room for vendors to come in and help these organizations who are buying your products do this stuff. Help them get out of the gate. Make it easier for them. Don't build more capabilities. Just help them use the one they've got. And that's usually my advice to these organizations as well. Is you've got to find ways to get people to use your stuff. There are not that many case studies of all these kind of pie-in-the-sky scenarios.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's basic principle to kind of go by. It really is.
It is.
Definitely. All right, so we've got one last thing that we want to go ahead and get to right now. Quite a few different stats in here as well. So a recent Gartner study actually presented at the 2012 Portal Content and Collaboration Summit found a couple interesting statistics. First off, 40% of portal initiatives fail to garner adequate adoption to achieve ROI. The second stat that I want to touch upon is 10 to 15% of portal initiatives are scrapped altogether. So Scott, now if portals continually to increase employee and business productivity as well as communications, collaboration, knowledge, things of that nature, why do so many portal redevelopment projects, do they actually fail?
So, a couple of context points here. Number one, we said it in a show earlier about how many just IT projects generally fail, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not so sure that this is that much higher than typical. That's number one. Number two is we've talked about portals as intranets, and I don't know that there's always a direct connotation that all portals are intranets. There's plenty of customer-facing, partner-facing portals, things like that, that are not necessarily intranets. But let's assume for the sake of this that we are talking about intranet projects failing that happen to also be portals. I think portals are very complex technology, and I think for a long time they were bought when they weren't necessarily needed. They didn't have a good justification. It was kind of the hot thing 12 years ago. I was implementing them 12 years ago or something. So I think for many folks, number one is that the scope is never ending for them, because a portal is a platform through which you can push through a number of other business applications to kind of pull it all into one place for an individual to be able to access many things from one place. So therefore, it doesn't really have a really clear end. right? The life cycle of that project just continues in terms of,
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
it gets any use at all, there's always something next to go and do.
It's it's like a cycle. It just continues and continues and continues to roll constantly.
Exactly. By the same token, though, you can run out of budget pretty quickly in that way. You're just doing tons of integrations. Oftentimes, they're run by IT. So anytime a project is run by IT where they are the champion of it, it becomes challenging because they haven't always necessarily gotten the business to make a demand for it, right? There's not always a real clear problem to solve. So oftentimes, it's just kind of doing technology for the sake of technology, and sometimes those tend to kind of have a higher likelihood of failure. I think
It's amazing what happens with us. I mean, we talk about something probably, I don't know if it was last month, but the month before, and then we continue to roll on, and it's like, oh, it just comes full circle.
It can, yeah,
It really does,
I mean,
in a
all
sense.
of this does. We can just, I think next year we'll just replay these. These
We'll just have to
shows.
change up the news items because those things will be
That's
over
right,
by that
that's
point.
right.
All right, so that is going to do it for the news right now. So what we're going to go ahead is move on to the big segment throughout the entire show. And right now we are actually going to be talking all about intranet solutions. That's what today's show is, in fact, all about. So joining us to the discussion, we actually have Business Development Director at Blend Interactive, Dean Barker. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up before I introduce Dean is actually most of us know whether you're looking to deploy an intranet, extranet, client portal, or custom collaboration solution. It's pretty key that you provide well-planned, structured information to your employees and team members, all the while gauging performances of the selected intranet system. So a lot of people are starting to wonder, and they're seeing this, what's actually the biggest problem with actually implementing an intranet today? So that's where we are, in fact, going to start. But as I mentioned, I have to welcome into the show Dean Barker. Dean, welcome in. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. You actually flew quite a ways to get here, so I appreciate you coming in. So nice little flight to get here. I heard you had a
Yeah, I
little snow
come out of I hail from the Midwest, so I got in about 3 o'clock this morning. So.
So if you see a little red eye going on, you understand why, folks. Okay, so Dean, let's talk about that. Right now, one of the things people are actually seeing is the problem. What's the biggest problem? Because there are a lot of problems, but what's the biggest problem that you see people are actually having with deploying that intranet solution?
Well, I think the biggest chronic problem, and the thing that we see more than anything, is user adoption. Intranet projects usually always go out of the gate. They're kind of the field of dream syndrome. If you build it, they will come. And this just doesn't happen. And the industry is just littered with projects where IT threw an intranet out there, expected the user base to pick it up, and they really didn't. And a lot of organizations think if I have $10 to spend on an intranet, I'm going to spend $9 on technology and implementation, and then I'll save $1 later on to work on training and internal marketing and things like that. And I think what it really should be is if you have $10 to spend, you should spend $4 before the project working on discovery and user needs and figuring out what your employees are really looking for. Spend about $2 on technology and implementation, and then $4 after the fact on marketing and training and internally evangelizing that solution, because your employees aren't just going to pick it up and run with it. And we see this in the SharePoint space a lot. IT departments throwing out SharePoint installs thinking, well, everyone's just going to rush to it. They're just starved for this kind of thing. And they just don't, and they end up just as kind of monuments to apathy out there in the organization.
I would advise them as an analyst that if you have $10 to spend on an intranet, that you should go get more budget. That's just what I would say, just so you know. That's the kind of value I bring to my clients. But talking about value, though, and talking about having that kind of business case for it, I was just saying it when we were talking about portals a second ago, and you said it again now. What is the value, the primary value that organizations look to get out of an intranet then?
The traditional answer is always couched in terms of productivity and collaboration and reduction of friction. And those are all very, very true. I think the real value of an intranet, and the thing that everybody overlooks, is really the psychological, strategic value of an intranet to an organization. I think that there is value in having some shared source of information. I think there is value in having this shared river of news about the organization, so employees have some source of information that they have in common. It's a communication channel that employees know that other employees are looking at. We have that shared experience. In journalism and in news, the psychological value of news, and the reason why human beings, we so desperately want news, is because we really, really crave shared experience.
Yeah,
and that's really what an intranet is for an organization. It's a way to present experience and news and information that all the employees share, and it becomes really a tool to bind employees. And so I've always thought that intranets are really about employee buy-in, and they have huge effects on morale. and huge effects on how employees identify with their organization. And that, honestly, below the covers, that is the real value of an intranet.
I was going to say, we actually saw it. We deployed one here at the Pulse Network, to be completely honest with you. We saw it, and it became kind of a collaboration tool amongst all of our employees and for a lot of social change inside the organization as well. So that was one of the pieces that we saw. So one of the things I want to know is kind of move away from that, though. What are some of the other drivers behind the trend towards social intranets, really?
The intranets are really just reflecting the web as a whole, and social has just so permeated what we do on the internet now. Employees are using Facebook at home, and they're using Twitter at home, using Instagram and whatever have you at home. And it's just the organization is kind of behind the times. It really needs to catch up in that respect. And so when employees use all these social tools at home, and then they come into the organization has nothing like that, there's kind of a dissonance there that the organization is really moving to correct. And that's the drive towards social intranets. They're trying to give abilities to share information like they do in their personal lives. And I think that we're in such an inflection point with this concept of sharing, and I think sharing can be such a cliched term, sharing and social, and it's been thrown around ad nauseum, but it has become the default of how we operate with information. When you see a very cool YouTube video or you see something really cool on the internet, for a lot of people, the first inclination is, who can I share this with? Who can I show this to? This is a really neat thing, right?
Like this as well.
I want to share this to somebody, and I think we're gradually evolving that way to evaluating information, and it would happen inside the organization as well. When I come up with a piece of corporate business intelligence, something I've learned, my first thought now is, how can I share this with my coworkers? What information could somebody else in the organization get out of that? And that's the drive towards social intranet. So in a lot of ways, I think it just mirrors what's going on outside the organization, but it has much greater value inside the organization.
So, but there's got to be, and this is actually kind of what Kathy and Tim were talking about yesterday on their webinar, which is that a social intranet for the sake of kind of being social, just for that purpose, isn't going to necessarily succeed. So talk about the organization must be. Is it a means to achieving some level of productivity then? Or, I mean, everything must be about that in an organization, or is it really truly to just kind of keep employees happy so that they're is that what it's all about? Are we talking unicorns again here?
I just wanted to bring it back to that. I know
I did. I just really wanted to say unicorns twice in one day.
That's one of the great features of any intranet is unicorns, clearly. I think the organization is still very much trying to find the value of a social intranet. I think it's out there. I don't think the organization has settled on it. I think as this gets more common, what we're going to find is the difference between a social intranet and a non-social intranet become very jarring. It's going to be one of those things where I can't tell you what the value is outright, but I know it when it's not there. And so if you have a company with a social intranet and that's working great for their employees, and then an employer were to leave there and go to a company with an intranet that really isn't social and has no social tools, that would be pretty jarring for them. And they would come, even though they couldn't articulate it when they were the first organization, they could very quickly see what they've lost. I think information sharing is something that is very hard to quantify. It's very hard to come out and say it has value X, Y, and Z for the organization. I think it's there. I think we're still trying to define it. I think we're still trying to get our arms around it, but I absolutely think there's value to it.
Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is actually kind of jump ahead just a little bit and talk about the cloud, because one of the things people are starting to look at is, what about intranet in the cloud? Talk to that a little bit, because people are starting to wonder about that a bit more.
The term the cloud gets overused so much, and it's such a vague, kind of vacuous term.
Yeah.
What does the cloud even mean? And I think I've kind of settled personally, my own definition of the cloud is that means it's somebody else's problem, right? So when something is in the cloud, it's hosted by somebody else, and it's really somebody else's problem. So really what we're talking about in some way are remotely hosted intranets. Intranets is somebody else that are hosted outside the firewalls of my company. I think it's a great idea. I think it worked well for a lot of organizations. A lot of organizations cannot get a lot of buy-in on their intranet from their own IT department. And in a lot of ways, they have to go outside their IT department to really get their intranet the way they want it. And so I think there's a lot of value at that. The problem that you're finding, the biggest problem, are going to be security issues. And there's the real, genuine security issue that you have enterprise information outside the network of the enterprise. But then there's also the perceived problem, and that's almost worse. Because even if there is no actual security problem, you have a compliance department, you have a legal department, you have an information security department that may just be absolutely gun shy and say, no, this just can't happen. And so if you're looking at doing some intranet in the cloud, some kind of remotely hosted intranet, you need to have that conversation with your compliance department, your legal department early, or you could have a very rude awakening later on. You could be right at the altar ready to pull the trigger on it, and compliance could come in and say, no, there's just no way we're going to let you do this. So you need to have those conversations early, but if you can get past the perceived security issues, I absolutely think it works great.
How about mobile? Does that have a role here? I mean, we talk about mobile an awful lot, certainly on the engaging with an external audience side. Is it valid inside the firewall?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question that any intranet should be mobile capable. I mean, that should be a bar that we're just, certainly by the end of this year, I would say we were just getting over naturally. If you're interviewing a vendor and they have no concept of a mobile intranet, they have no mobile capability in their intranet, you probably need to find another vendor. Now, that said, the issue of mobile intranets is very much combined with the issues around bring your own device.
Yep.
So you have a mobile intranet and you encourage all your employees to log onto the intranet from their Galaxy Note or what have you. You now have entry points into your intranet in the pockets of all these employees walking around airports all around the countries. And so if somebody loses their device and they're currently logged into their intranet, you just need to make sure you have a plan to handle that. And that's why it's very bound up with this concept of bring your own device. You need to make sure you have a plan to handle it if there is some kind of security issue, because you've essentially put entry points into your intranet on 1,000 different devices walking around the world. So you just need to be aware of that, but other than that, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Well, what about features? I mean, everybody comes on, they want to know about the features that they're going to get. At this point in time, when people are looking at, what are the key features? What are some of those key features in particular that people love?
Lunch menu. Isn't that what it is? Everybody goes to the intranet to get the lunch menu. That's what I hear from every single client, is that everybody goes to the intranet. The most popular thing on the intranet is the lunch menu. But that's not a feature. Go ahead.
That's not a joke. I mean, that's very, very true.
No, I know. I'm not joking.
Really?
Everyone talks about intranets. I mean, the lunch menu is very, very important. Traditionally, the most commonly used parts of the lunch menu. The most commonly used part of the lunch menu. The most commonly used part of the intranet is going to be the employee directory. It is going to be this list of employees. And those range from just simple phone lists, here's this person, their title and their phone number, to more complex ways in large organizations of connecting employees around an issue, of the way of advertising expertise inside an organization. I know about X, Y, and Z, and if you're having some problem about this, please get in touch with me. But I think you can't talk about key features in intranets without talking about search. I think search is really the killer app of intranets. It is the thing that gets done extremely poorly and should be done extremely well. Whenever anyone embarks on an intranet project, we spend a lot of time working with information architecture, planning out these grand information architecture schemes, which I think is very, very important, but then we kind of just think search will take care of itself. And you need to nail search. You need to sweat search. You need to be, if I can give somebody one piece of advice about an ongoing intranet project, is you need to be doing analytics on your search metrics. You need to be reviewing your search terms. What are people looking for? When one of your employees goes on your intranet and they put something in that search box and hit enter, that is like they walked up to your desk and said, this is what I need from my intranet. That is a gift. That's a huge gift. And if you are not looking at your search analytics, you are missing a huge opportunity to improve your intranet. Lou Rosenfeld, who wrote the Polar Bear book, probably this seminal book on information architecture, released a book late last year on search analytics. The entire book is about search analytics, about how to track the searches on your intranets and how to track the searches on your website and what you can do with that information. And I guarantee if somebody has an established website or established intranet, they start looking at their search analytics, they will come away with a very, very different understanding of what people want out of their websites. And sometimes it'll be a very, very jarring experience for them. But search is one of the key features. It's one of the ones that is never done well.
Why is it so hard to get it right, though? I mean, I'm looking at that because my follow-up question really is, what's so hard to get right in an intranet? But one of the things that you just said right there was, it's one of the key features that's never necessarily done right. Why is that? What's the reasoning for that?
Just not paying attention to it, or what?
I maintain Google ruined it for all of us. Yeah. I mean, Google really, Google fundamentally ruined search for everybody. With Google, they make it seem so effortless and so perfect and so amazing that we simply expect that that's how search is going to work. And so when people do an intranet project, they think, well, I'll just get a Google search appliance, or I'll pay $30,000 for Coveo or something like that, and it'll just work itself out because that's what Google does and it works. And so Google has made it look so effortless that I don't think we put in the time we need to really make it work well. And they just don't have any idea of how much work goes on behind the scenes to make a search solution work. And so in some extent, I hate to leave it all on Google's doorstep, but they have made it more difficult to do search well because they've, among people planning intranet projects, they've set the expectation that search is solved, it just works great.
Yeah, no, I think that's really valid. Not only have they raised the bar really high, but actually when folks want to go and buy and build a search appliance, bring it inside the Google search appliance, it is so well honed because of the millions and millions and millions of searches that are going on the internet today. But inside an intranet, it's not that much. Your pool of search queries is small, far shorter, far smaller. So.
But even at GSA, even the Google Search Appliance, we've implemented that 5 or 6 times. Even to do that right takes an enormous amount of tuning. You cannot expect, and I think Google really set this up poorly, because they sold the GSA and they sold the Google Mini as these 1 and 2U rack units. And well, you're just going to install these, you're going to turn them on, and it's just going to work. Right. To really get those working well, it still requires significant tuning. You have to make sure your content has good metadata. You have to make sure it's all indexable. You have to make sure, do they just want to do a free text search, or should you be searching other repositories? There's so many other things you need to do to make that work. And I think that Google, not only have they set the bar high with their public search engine, but they've sort of got this false, they've got us thinking we just need to buy the GSA, plug it in, and it works. And they don't realize for every $1 you spend on the GSA, you probably need to spend another $2 planning the implementation of that and planning kind of the ongoing care, maintenance, and tuning of that. So,
How about adoption? I tend to find an awful lot of organizations who have maybe even put tons and tons of work behind and justification behind and effort into an intranet, and then it tends to have trouble with adoption. Do you find that as one of the kind of the big issues for you, and any advice there?
I think without question, adoption is the biggest problem facing intranet projects. And if you are doing an intranet project and adoption is not absolutely on your top 10 list of risks, you really have a problem. One of the things that you don't understand when you're doing an intranet is you tend to be in this echo chamber when you're doing this intranet project, because you know about this intranet project, and this is just going to be this amazing thing, and you have had meetings where you have sat down and you've discussed how this is going to transform the enterprise. For the employees not on your team, this is just one more thing they have to deal with. And I think one of the problems facing intranets is what I call the repository authority problem, which is now we have just one more repository, one more silo in which we have to put information. If I'm an employee that has a Word document about something, what do I do with that? Where do I store that information? What is the repository for that information? And we tend to think, as working in enterprise IT, well, this just makes sense. You put it over here or you put it over there. Employees don't really understand that. There's a really funny XKCD cartoon where the first panel of the cartoon is the problem. And the problem is there are 14 competing standards. And the middle panel is the solution. We're going to make one universal standard to rule over them all. And then the last panel is the result. There are now 15 competing standards. So essentially what you're doing, when you're creating an intranet, we tend to think, well, scorched earth, we're throwing away everything, this is going to be the new thing. To employees, it's just one more thing. Yep. And what have you done to market that? What have you done to evangelize that, to get employees to understand, no, this is the actual thing. This is where this fits in to the organizational architecture, and this is how you should be using it. That's always an afterthought. You see that, I hate to call out SharePoint again, but you see that with SharePoint all the time. People in IT think SharePoint solves every problem. We're going to throw SharePoint at the problem and it's just going to be fixed. To employees, it's just one more thing.
Absolutely. So the last question I'll ask you, because I know you have to run, let's talk about misunderstandings real quickly. What do you think about misunderstandings? What are some of the biggest misunderstandings about intranets right now?
I think there's a tendency to have this one-to-one relationship that our intranet is a website. It's this internal website. Traditionally, intranets have been run like internal newspapers. They're run to allow management to just kind of push information out one way. I think a more mature understanding of an intranet in your organization is that it's one silo among many. You have an internal website, that's one silo. You also have an email or collaboration platform, be it Exchange or GroupWise or even Lotus Notes or whatever. You also have a whole ton of file shares. I promise you, you've got hundreds of file shares floating around. You probably have a search engine and some kind of user management system that goes over all of them. Your intranet is just one piece of that puzzle. And when you look at things like search, going back to search, if your search system is only searching your intranet, the internal website, you're missing out an enormous amount more information in other silos. Intranets, in my mind, intranets bind multiple silos together. They're not just one silo into themselves. And I think what we really need to do in this industry is take a step back and get a broader view of what constitutes an intranet and really come to the understanding that intranets need to bridge silos. And this internal website that everybody means when they say our intranet, that's just one silo that exists among many.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Great stuff indeed. Honestly, Dean, thank you so much for coming by. Really appreciate it. Great stuff, for sure.
Yeah, appreciate having you on, man.
Awesome. That right there, folks, Dean Barker from Blend Interactive. Dean, for the folks out there who want to get in touch with you, where can they reach you right now?
You can tweet me on Gadgetopia. And I also blog at gadgetopia.com. I've been blogging out there for about 10 years.
And dude, give a plug. We got 30 more seconds. Talk about what next, or the Now What conference. Just tell us about that real quick.
We're having a conference in Sioux Falls. It's called Now What 2013, and it's about you have a website, now what happens after your website launches. It's April 18th. It's in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We have speakers coming in from all over the country. We have Kathy McKnight coming from Digital Clarity. We have Seth Gottlieb, who's going to be on this show later on. And so check it out. We would love to have you. Sioux Falls is a beautiful city. We'd love to have you out.
Awesome. Very cool.
I love the write-up of the premise of the whole thing. It's awesome. So check it out.
Very cool, Dean. Now, you heard Dean just a few seconds ago talk about Seth Gottlieb, and we are going to be bringing Seth up on set in just a few moments. But before we go, we're going to take a very quick break. We'll be back with In the Spotlight here on CMS Connected.
Businesses today demand a powerful web content management and online marketing platform that can provide the best value at an affordable price with unlimited website possibilities. Kentico, the .NET enterprise marketing solution and web content management platform of choice, powers more than 12,000 websites in over 84 countries, which means you get a stable, well-tested solution. Fully loaded with over 350 web parts and controls and more than 80 extensible modules. Kentico provides you with a fully integrated solution for building your online presence and running successful online marketing campaigns. It allows you to quickly launch an effective B2B or B2C site, intranet, online store, or branded online community, fully integrated with Facebook and Twitter. Organizations need to be more effective at catering to the personalities of their site visitors and the way they consume information. Sites need to more dynamically adjust to each site visitor to optimize their experience. Kentico EMS delivers a complete customer experience management platform that provides all of the necessary capabilities for interactive marketing, from planning and conception through optimization and execution. And lastly, analysis. Gain the insight required to analyze your marketing performance. Align the content, execution, and analytics critical for successful interactive campaigns, speeding delivery, and optimizing return on investment. With a fully integrated set of online marketing tools, Kentico EMS can improve your online marketing efforts, which allows you to focus on what's important, making your business successful. Test drive Kentico EMS today to get a complete appreciation of all its powerful features and capabilities.
Hey everyone, welcome back to CMS Connected here on the Pulse Network. I'm your host, Tyler Pyburn, and it's time for this In the Spotlight. Yes, indeed. Today in the Spotlight, we're actually going to be reviewing CoreMedia. So some quick statistics on CoreMedia. Established in 1996, CoreMedia is headquartered in Hamburg, Germany, with offices in San Francisco, London, and Singapore. And really, who is CoreMedia is what everybody's wondering. Well, according to them, they are a leading provider in web content management software to organizations demanding engaging, context-driven online experiences for their customers, regardless of channel or touch point. Now, CoreMedia has among its client base some of the most prestigious Fortune 1000 companies across the world and claims an impressive 97% client retention rate. Pretty powerful number right there. So, joining us in studio to review CoreMedia's their latest release, which is version 7, is Seth Gottlieb. Seth, welcome to the show. You're the regular. You're like the staple in here right now at this point in time. How's it going?
Good. It's good to be back. It's it's always fun to do this show with you guys.
Excellent. Perfect. So we're talking about CoreMedia. We're talking about the latest release of 7. CoreMedia may not be a familiar name on our North American audience as some of the other WCM products out there, but can you give us a little background on the product?
Yeah.
Give us kind of your thoughts.
Yeah. So if you're been in the North American market for like we have, you might not have heard of CoreMedia. As you said, they've been in business for around 16 years. They're a German company, so they're more widely known in Europe. They've got a few, or actually several flagship customers, and I think that their big customers are media companies and telecom companies, ones that have like really high traffic demands and tons of content. So it's a very powerful platform, but their invasion of North America has been very slow. I think all the European companies would love to be the next Sitecore that comes in. But I would say that CoreMedia they've been a little tentative about getting into this market. They've been doing it for a really long time, and it's always like just about getting into the market. So what it's going to take for them is timing and investment. And the timing definitely feels like it's right because you think about the other Java, the pool of companies that Java shops are looking at, the large enterprise WCM platforms, and it's really thinning out due to acquisition. You have TeamSite is owned by Autonomy, which is owned by HP, and HP doesn't really love owning that, and then yeah, exactly. And you have like FatWire is owned by Oracle, and we all know about Oracle, and it's like Vignette and OpenText, and sorry, Kevin. And then you have Percussion, which is kind of a smaller known local company, and they've really changed direction out of that market. So the timing is right. It's a matter of getting into that market and investing appropriately. And the big thing for them is to be building a marketplace of systems integrators that can build great solutions on the platform.
So let's talk about some of the features. What are some of
Sure.
the features? We were just talking about it with Intranets right then, a couple minutes ago. Let's talk
Yeah,
about it with
yeah,
CoreMedia.
yeah.
What are some of the key features?
Sure. So the core functionality, the core strength of CoreMedia has always been the architecture. You can think about their flagship customers. The big media companies built .de, and there's just a bunch of big websites with lots of companies running on it. So unless you're massive, you're not going to be the largest CoreMedia customer. So their strength is the architecture. It's a dynamic delivery platform, which means that pages are assembled as they're requested, which allows you to do all sorts of personalization and access control. So every page is built for that visitor. But they've really beefed up, or they have a very powerful architecture that allows you to scale horizontally. So you can add lots and lots of front-end servers onto the system. I've talked to a customer that had 50 front-end servers that's just dealing just insane amount of traffic. So that's their core strength, and it's just what they've had for forever. They also have a component-based content model, which you'll see in the Sitecores and the Tridians and all those. So that's very powerful because if you have a lot of content, it allows you to do a lot of really good reuse. So everything I've been talking about so far is going to be putting like the marketing people to sleep, and it's like that's like why they've been so good so far. But with 6 and more 7, they've started to think about more the business user, and that's when we're getting into their Studio product, which is kind of used as a page builder metaphor, where you choose a layout and you can fill it with content, and you see that in a lot of the other platforms, and they've done quite a nice job with it. So you can spin up like a microsite or something like that and just kind of load it with content and objects. So very powerful type of tool there. They also have great preview functionality, so you can set up personalization rules, and then you can view as a specific persona to see how that personalization logic will work. You can see it on different devices. So really good if you want to be hyper aware of all the different ways your content might be viewed, which real content managers should be thinking about.
Definitely.
And then lastly, you have their relationship with SAP, their web content manager, or their web channel experience. So you get a lot of the kind of marketing automation and personalization rules and things like that out of that platform. So,
Excellent.
a lot of really compelling business type of things, and then also, I guess I should throw in there the Elastic Social product,
Yep.
which is building social capability and also whole our infrastructure to support the high volume transactional transient content that a social application might have.
All right, so what I want you to do right now is kind of summarize and wrap it all up for me. So when we were going back and forth with emails, one of the things you had said over, you'll love it if,
Yeah.
and steer clear if. So
Sure.
give me those right now.
Sure.
So CoreMedia is a very powerful and capable application. If you have a lot of content and you want to actively manage it, you'll be happy with that solution. You should also expect to have a very strong Java development capability in-house, because you're not going to find many systems integrators that know the platform at all. Most of the experts in North America belong to CoreMedia customers.
Okay.
Not so much integrators. So if you have a really strong Java capability in-house and you want to send them all to Hamburg to learn CoreMedia, you'll be great with it. If your site is small, or if you don't want to be so self-reliant, there are probably other platforms that you would be better to be using.
All right, excellent, good stuff, Seth. As always, it's a pleasure. We'll keep you here though for right now. So let's give me kind of your, overarching background, Scott. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Seth covered a lot of what I would say about CoreMedia, which is this really kind of tale of two companies things with them. Where over in Europe they're extremely quite prevalent, great reputation over there. Over in the States, they've been around trying to get out of the gate for the last 3 years or so, more than that, and really haven't moved the needle much at all. I really had high hopes for them, and I even think I said on this show around this time last year that they made an arrangement with SAP, where essentially SAP was using them and pushing to them for, they kind of came out and announced to a number of the analysts in the CMS universe that they were going to be their kind of WCM of choice, right? And so SAP, we thought, was kind of going to go pull them through into a bunch of their clients. And I think that started to happen over in Europe a little bit, but it hasn't nearly amounted up to, I thought, okay, wow, SAP's pulling you in, all of a sudden they're not going to have to get into competitive bids, but they're going to slowly take over the world over there, and that hasn't really matriculated into too much. I think SAP has a pretty big relationship with OpenText as well, and a number of others. Yeah. So I think they have a lot of girlfriends. But so I had high hopes for it from that. But I really think from a marketing standpoint, from just getting in there, I've also seen them walk away from a number of deals where I've even actually put them into some deals before where they've walked away because they're kind of afraid of losing some of those deals, I think, when they think that somebody else has already got a leg in. So that's happened in a number of cases. So I'm not quite sure. I think they're looking always for that perfectly right next customer in the US, and maybe they need to be a little bit less conservative. Would be my advice to them about getting out there. Because as Seth talked about, it is a great product, it is a good platform. I don't think they know the competitive landscape so well here in the US. Had a briefing with them about CoreMedia 7 just a couple of weeks ago, and they introduced a blueprinting concept, which is a pretty significant concept within another one of their major competitors out there, to the point that it might even be a trademark term. I mean, it's a pretty significant part of what they do.
But it's a different, they use it differently.
Completely differently, but I asked them to tell me how that compares, and they didn't even realize that somebody else was using it. I mean, this was, so it befuddled me. It befuddled me that they didn't know that at all, didn't know what they're up against, and this would be a competitor that they would go head to head with constantly if they were in
Another
deals.
European competitor.
Another European competitor.
Yeah.
So, who's a sponsor of this show and is behind
We won't
us
say
here
their
on this
name.
board, but we won't say their name. Anyway.
We're going to move on from that. Excellent stuff right there. Seth, it's a pleasure as always, my friend, and I'm sure we'll probably even see you next month, right? the way it always works out. Seth Gottlieb of Lionbridge, excellent stuff indeed. Make sure you can tweet Seth as well at SGG Gottlieb. So it's SG Gottlieb. So that's the one thing that you need to make sure that everybody does out there. So that right there was in the spotlight with CoreMedia. In fact, and big thanks to Seth for go ahead and making sure we're talking about Version 7 indeed. So that's really what we want to touch upon today, is inside of version 7 really for CoreMedia. So with all of that in mind, we only have a couple minutes left in today's show, but of course we like to wrap things up the only way we know how, and that is in fact with rapid fire. So we basically like to take a couple minutes to go through some of the big news and events. And some of the big transactions that are actually taking place out there. So let's go ahead and let's get things started. First, Scott, let's talk about marketing is broken, because Tom Wentworth, who we've actually talked to in the past, he's the CMO at Acquia now. We actually talked about Tom and his movement from Extron to Acquia just last month. Posted an article with the title, Think Customers, Not Channels. Now, in the post, Tom states, and I quote Tom right here, "We organize our marketing teams around channels, digital, email, social media, mobile, and retail, and other areas. Each team assigned a budget and their success measured. In our effort to be organized and effective, we create teams that end up competing for businesses against each other, fighting over the same customers to show growth in their channel." And there's the basic problem with the channel approach. Customers don't organize around channels. Customers see products, brands, and services holistically. They don't care about internal walls, legacy processes, and poorly integrated technologies. Tom, you're long-winded right there. I love you, but you were long-winded there. So give me your thoughts on that, Scott.
He was long-winded in the last one too. Didn't you have to read his quote to us last time that was like 3 pages long or something ridiculous?
So I can't say anything bad about it.
No, it's good. He didn't realize that his post was going to be read aloud on this show. So no, I think he's completely right. What Tom is talking about here is that marketing organizations are organized where they've got a person that's assigned to social, and they've got a person that's assigned to PR, and they've got a person that's assigned to Marcom, and or multiple. And he's basically saying that many times these are kind of one-to-one relationships with the various channel that they're pushing out content through, and that if we're trying to organize a customer's experience and unify that experience to the degree that it's they can pick up where they left off from one device or interaction with us rather to the next, then we need to be more concerted in our own teams. And I think that's right. I don't think necessarily we need to worry about organizing our teams, but we need to reorganize our processes, and that's kind of my takeaway for that.
Excellent. Let's go into the next one. Let's talk about Salesforce, because Salesforce.com has actually very quietly acquired a startup called EntropySoft. They're actually a maker of content management and integration software. Now, in a move likely meant to bolster Salesforce's Chatterbox service and give Salesforce.com instant content management and integration technologies. Salesforce, they're always making moves. What do you think of this latest one?
Yeah, Salesforce is always making moves, and they're always pushing the envelope a bit. I think, when they do it, I don't know that they necessarily, buy the best in the world per se, but they kind of buy good enough and they let their brand carry it through. I think in this case, EntropySoft is well known for essentially, being the glue between the pieces. So it's not another kind of product that has created a CMS system or anything like that. This is really about kind of the interactivity between pieces. So, as we know, we've just said, Salesforce has bought an awful lot of pieces to pull into the mix. They have their site.com, they have data.com, they have a number of parts now. They're no longer just a CRM engine. They're trying to essentially help you to unify some of that process that we're talking about. And so I think a purchase like an EntropySoft that essentially makes the interaction easier between these particular pieces of technology is a natural move for them, and it's a pretty darn good idea.
So earlier we talked about CXM and customer experience management, and obviously 2012 is a big year for that. Let's talk about 2013. It's going to be an even bigger year. Now, according to VP Products for SDL, Ian Truscott, it's the content professional, because of that, that's going to be in high demand. Talk about the demand right now for those content professionals out there.
Yeah, this is, so I haven't yet read Ian's piece. So I think that, so I don't know exactly what he said there, but I think that it's an important point that customer experience is all the talk. And as Robert stated in the point that we made earlier, it's the holy grail that everyone is seeking, and they're not necessarily sure how to go about doing it, how to go about getting it. I think we've seen the rise of big data, where that is on everyone's mind. And if you're looking at a marketing organization, the position that they're constantly trying to hire right now is any sort of a data analyst, right? To be able to make sense of this stuff and be able to help to put them in the position to be much more be able to speak and be able to be more relevant to their audience, right? So I think that's one big thing. Another one is, again, anybody who's got a good ability to manage the social channel, the mobile channel. We're just growing and expanding so much. The marketing organization is taking on now not just marketing, but kind of the overall ownership of the experience. And so the need for folks to enter that group is pretty significant. Lots of different skill sets.
So Episerver, let's move on to the next topic. Episerver, they actually just announced another partnership, really. They and Silverpop, a digital marketing technology provider that unifies marketing automation, email, mobile, and social. They actually announced plans to integrate their platforms together. Now, Episerver states, quote, "The integration will help marketers more effectively manage their online presence and deliver timely and relevant content to their target audience." Scott, what do you make of this partnership in particular?
I think it's interesting. I think it's a natural move for an Episerver who has always kind of come to the table and brought as much of the suite together as possible, right? So they have got the commerce engine, and they've got the social, and they've got all the different pieces, much like a Sitecore, where a Sitecore has built all of that natively. Episerver has built some of it natively, and they've acquired some of it. I think what this does for them is it brings together another piece. We're not talking about an acquisition here. This is yet another, though, push into this marketing automation frontier, where we saw the Eloqua purchase a couple of months ago by Oracle, and we said then that there's going to be an awful lot of sweeping up of these their competitors out there, the Marketos, the Silverpops of the world. So this is not an acquisition. Episerver is known, by the way, to make these partnerships and then acquire. I'm not necessarily predicting that here, but I think it's good to help round out their suite. That if they have a deep integration with a marketing automation tool, it's good for any CMS to be thinking about.
All right, finally, we actually announced, I believe it was in November, we talked about the Code.ie Awards, the Cody Awards, basically. Oh, yeah. And one of the things I wanted to touch upon this month, it happens to be some of the big winners out there, and it looks like Adobe. We talked about Adobe earlier being the top of the chart when we were talking about Kevin Cochrane. Yep. Well, it looks like that's the exact same case that we're talking about here with the Cody Awards, because they were cleaning house, essentially. Some of the awards that they actually won: Best Content Management Platform for Adobe CQ, Best Solution for Integrating Content into the Workflow for Adobe FrameMaker 11, and Best Testing, Monitoring, and Analytics Platform for Adobe Digital Marketing Suite. Adobe just mopping the floor with everybody right now.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, and again, I think I said it was just last month that we talked about that it was coming up, and I was at that awards dinner, and it was funny because the guy from Adobe actually wasn't there. His plane, I think it was a snowstorm or something like that, and he was coming in from Chicago. His plane was delayed, and so he wasn't there for the first few announcements in the morning. So when he got there, he had to go and accept like 3 awards at a time. So it was kind of crazy, but they did win it for the Content Management Award, also for the Integrating Content into the Workflow for FrameMaker. So it's different parts of the Adobe stack that were winning the awards, but I think it just goes to show that marketers run this game, right, in terms of this interaction with our customers. They've always owned this space, the content management space, and Adobe has always been a very familiar brand to marketers, right? So from their Photoshop and everything else that they were doing, they've known well the CMO suite, and I think we're just seeing that level of comfort with the Adobe platform continue to expand into other areas that they might be new in, but makes a lot of sense. So congratulations to them.
And so let's go touch upon the very last point, and that is a Forrester report out there talking about the future of mobile application development. Now, the report actually notes some of the forces influencing modern software creation for mobile devices, including multi-channel clients, elastic infrastructure, flexible licensing, feedback from customers, really just to name a few throughout this entire thing. Scott, what's your takeaway from this report in particular?
So I think the point is really valid, and it's one that Tim Walters also made on my team, and he wrote a paper basically talking about mobile being the entrance into the kind of making use of the ubiquity of the web, right? That essentially mobile is not just about, and going mobile is not just about, putting your information, squeezing it onto a smaller device. It's very helpful to, implement things like responsive design to be able to, make those more usable. But I think it really is about making full-on use of this new device, not just another way of showing people stuff, but actually interacting with them and taking advantage of the context that you have, that you know exactly where they are with the GPS capabilities, that you can utilize the camera, that you can utilize. So the point here is he's talking about this development of these other applications, the non kind of interface related things, to take advantage of those so that we can truly kind of leverage the notion that you have full on context with where a person is, what they're doing, and how they act. And that's, I think, the next frontier for how mobile will be used.
Excellent. Good stuff. Scott, as always, my friend, great show, huh?
Yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed having these two guys. I mean, seriously, between Seth and Dean, I said this in a tweet, but both of them have forgot more about content management in this industry than many of us will ever know. And really both amazing people to have, and it's great to have them both on the show.
And of course, I want to remind everybody that these conversations and this show in particular is in fact going to be on demand, so I highly advise you to go back and go ahead and watch those. Great show indeed. Make sure you mark your calendars for March because it's all about e-commerce, and of course we'll be in the spotlight as well. And of course, we'd like to thank our sponsors for helping put this entire show on. Of course, Falcon Software, as well as DCG, Digital Clarity Group. So on behalf of Scott Liewehr and Dean Barker and Seth Gottlieb, I'm Tyler Pyburn of the Pulse Network. This has been CMS Connected. We'll see you guys in March.